That'll be enough. Yeah. Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Mr. Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Ashtotar Dada Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Ashtotar Dada Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. So we're going to be on page 350 tonight. Welcome. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 22nd day of February 2021 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And today we're going to be studying text 6 of chapter 8, entitled Attaining the Supreme. And it's on page 350 of most of your books. Yam Vapi Smadam Bhavam Chajatyante Kalevaram Tam Evaitikunteya Sada Tadbhavabhavitaha Yam Vapi Smadam Bhavam Chajatyante Kalevaram Tam Evaitikunteya Sada Tadbhavabhavitaha Yang Vapi Smaran Bhavam Chajatyante Kalevaram Tam Evaiti Kunteya Sada Tadbhavabhavitaha Yang Vapi Smaran Bhavam Chajatyante Kalevaram Tang tamevaiti kaunteya sadatod bhava bhavitaha yang yang vapi smaran bhavam chajatyante kalevaram tang tamevaiti kaunteya sadatod bhava bhavitaha yang yang vapi smaran bhavam chajatyante kalevaram tang tamevaiti kaunteya sadatod bhava bhavitaha yang yang vapi smaran bhavam sajatyante kalevaram tang tamevaiti kaunteya sadatad bhava bhavitaha. Ladies? No? Okay. Yam yam, whatever, va api, at all, smaran, remembering, bhavam, nature, chajati, gives up, ante, at the end, kalevaram, this body, tam tam, similar, eva, certainly, eti, gets, kaunteya, O son of Kunti, sada, always, tat, that, bhava, state of being, bhavitaha, remembering. Translation. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. Purport. The process of changing one's nature at the critical moment of death is here explained. A person who at the end of his life quits his body thinking of Krishna attains the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. But it is not true that a person who thinks of something other than Krishna attains the same transcendental state. This is a point we should note very carefully. How can one die in the proper state of mind? Maharaj Bharata, although a great personality, thought of a deer at the end of his life, and so in his next life he was transferred into the body of a deer. Although as a deer he remembered his past activities, he had to accept that animal body. Of course, one's thoughts during the course of one's life accumulate to influence one's thoughts at the moment of death. So this life creates one's next life. If in one's present life one lives in the mode of goodness and always thinks of Krishna, it is possible for one to remember Krishna at the end of one's life. That will help one be transferred to the transcendental nature of Krishna. If one is transcendently absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, spiritual, not material. Therefore the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is the best process for successfully changing one's state of being at the end of one's life. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So just to review, Krishna is answering a series of questions Arjuna posed to him at the beginning of the chapter, and those questions are based on several verses Krishna spoke at the end of the 7th chapter. Krishna has explained, what is the nature of the living entity. He says in text 3, the indestructible transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Action pertaining to the development of material bodies of the living entities is called karma, or fruit of activities. Now that's worth noting, because we're talking about, in this verse 6 that we read, how one gets another body. So if one is still absorbed in fruit of activities and the desires that are one of the main fruits of those fruit of activities, the desires themselves, then that will ensure one gets another material body to try to fulfill those desires. So fruit of activity is the seed, if you will, is the substance of getting a next body, and that's what Krishna says here. What is adibhuta? O best of the embodied beings, the physical nature which is constantly changing is called Adibhuta, the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods like those of the sun and moon, is called Adidaiva. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as the super soul in the heart of every embodied being, am called Adiyagya, the Lord of sacrifice. Now, then he gets to the nub of the question, really. How can one know you at the time of death? What is the process? And this previous verse, text 5, 6, and 7, are a whole lesson in and of themselves. That's why sometimes for a Sunday feast I just focus on those 3 verses, because it gives an entire lesson. So previously, text 5, he gave the essential verse of Krishna consciousness, and whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Now this reminds me of the beginning of the 2nd canto. If you study the Bhagavatam, you'll see, you read the 1st canto, there's some very important information there and lessons and so many things, but it's more or less a story of how the book came to be. It's a lot of pastimes of Maharaj Parikshit there, and how he was cursed by Shringi, this Brahmin boy, because he had insulted his father, and it goes on like that. And then at the end of the 1st canto, Maharaj Parikshit has come down. He's given up his kingdom. He's given up his royal dress. He's sitting by the bank of the Ganges on the Yamuna, and waiting for death to come. 7 days, and all the great sages from all over the world and all over the universe have come, to witness this. And then Shukadeva Goswami arrives and sits down, and Maharaj Parikshit asks him a few questions. And one of the main questions was, what should one think about? What should one hear? What should one chant as death approaches? And Prabhupada makes it very clear in the purport, that's all of us. We're just fools and rascals if we think that death isn't approaching us. That's one of the silver linings of the COVID-19. Suddenly everyone has to think of death. Could happen anywhere. I better wear the mask. I better not go out. For most people, it's just a tremendous source of anxiety, obviously. But for devotees, we can say, okay, this is reality. I got to be Krishna conscious. I can't fool around, So that's the previous verse. Then the verse we just read gives the general principle, and this is one of the main preaching points. When you meet somebody who's a little interested in Krishna consciousness or yoga or transcendence, or has read some of the Vedas and Bhagavad Gita, then it's important to focus on the lesson as Krishna gives it. You remember the beginning of the 2nd chapter, or 2:11, where he starts his instructions. He's speaking about how you're lamenting for what's not worthy of grief. You should concentrate on the soul. The soul is eternal. It never dies. It's passing through the body. And transmigration of the soul, karma, reincarnation, all of those are basic lessons. And it's not just, that's a wonderful thing, let me think about that, No, that's a very important consideration in everything we do. How can I end this process of transmigration? Not how can I think about it and groove on it or anything like that, but there's a imperative there. We want to end it. And so that's what this is all about. How to cultivate one's thoughts. That's what Krishna consciousness is all about. So at the time of death, we're naturally going to think of Krishna, because our lives have been dedicated to Krishna, and we've come to the point of constant remembrance by constantly chanting and serving and hearing, and that's the whole idea. So here's the general principle. Now Prabhupada, he refers to this story of King Bharata. Many of you are familiar with that. You know that story from the 5th canto? Yeah. And it's very instructive. Now he was in a different age, of course. That was Satya Yuga or something, And he, oftentimes you'll find that these great kings, they retire at the end of life, and then they perform severe austerities. Go to the forest, live very austerely, and try to purify their existence so that they can achieve the goal of life. It's hard after all the whole lifetime of being a king. You imagine all the attachments, the involvements, and things. So Maharaj Bharata didn't want to wait. He left home when he was young. It's described like that very graphically. And he went and he was practicing yoga, meditation, but it was devotional yoga. He was thinking of Krishna. And he got up to the point of bhava, describes, the very high level. And but then he, by Krishna's arrangement, providence, he developed an attraction for a little fawn. It's like, well, who wouldn't try to help this fawn, he's meditating, and suddenly he hears the roar of a lion. He opens his eyes, and there's a stream nearby, and he sees this lion, or tiger, I forget which, running after a pregnant deer. And the deer just makes it into the water. It swims across. Apparently, the lions, they don't go in the water, so she's safe from the lion, but she's completely freaking out. Her heart must be beating a mile a minute, She flops down on the other side of the stream and gives birth and expires. So now you have this delicate little fawn, helpless fawn, and there's Bharat looking at the fawn. So naturally, he's a soft-hearted Vaishnava. He goes and takes him. Who wouldn't, So the fawn knows no one else is his mother but Bharat. So he feeds the fawn. So now he's meditating. He's described in the Bhagavad Gita. He's meditating. He says, where's the fawn? Is he getting into danger? He's getting distracted. Oh, so he's meditating, and sometimes the fawn is coming and nibbling at his ear. It's time to feed me, like that. So naturally, he's got this affection, this attachment for the fawn. So he takes birth as a deer, but because of his advancement, he doesn't forget. He's able to remember. Says, okay, now I got the body of the deer. I'm not going to hang out with the deer. He finds some little ashram of devotees, and he's listening like that. Then he takes his next birth, is called Jadabharat. So in this birth, he doesn't want to take any chances, of getting. So he plays dumb. That's the Jadabharat, that he can't speak. He's actually very intelligent, but he plays dumb. So they give him various simple jobs to perform. And one of them was taking care of the cows, watching over the cows. So he's doing that, chanting Hare Krishna. I don't think it has beads or anything. And he gets, the pastime, he gets kidnapped by some Kali worshippers who are going to offer him, human sacrifice. So, he's completely indifferent. Whatever Krishna wants, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And so they're offering, they're getting ready, and there's this Kali deity they have, very Kalabharava, spheres with the skulls around and everything, So they would worship directly, So they're preparing him. They washed him, they clothed him very nicely. They're going to cut off his head in a few minutes. And Mother Kali, who's after all a devotee, she gets furious at her own worshippers, comes out of the deity, and then with her associates, chops off their heads in the big bloody scene, and everything. There's this painting. Bharat is just chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Anyway, he has various adventures and eventually goes back to Godhead from that life. But the idea is that the whole point of this, and we're going to read the next verse too, because they're a whole lesson, is that how can one live one's life in such a way? Because the answer that Shukadev gives, first he said, very nice question. Vadyanashate prashna krito loka hetang nipa atnavit samatang yaksmataha something. He says, this is a very nice question. Vadyanashate prashna. The answer to this question will benefit the speaker and the hearer and the audience who's listening in, But mostly, Shotavyadni Nirajanirnan Sangti Apashyatam Atma Tattvam, those who have no vision of the truth of the soul, the Grihamadis, just materialists, they have millions of things to hear, Now it's become a problem. You can get onto the internet and hear whatever you want, and you get into some weird conspiracy theory, and you find somebody who believes it, and before you know it, you're believing who knows what, right? You know that. So it's a huge mountain of babble, and there's some corners of it we know that are very Krishna conscious. You can see so many things. But basically it just has increased people's madness. There's madness. So what to do? He gives a description of materialistic life in a couple of verses, and he says, therefore, if one is intelligent, tasmat bharata, because he's a descendant of Bharat. Tasmat Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishwaro Hari Shotavyak Ketitavyascha Smartavyak Chechitabayam. For those who want fearlessness at the time of death, because it's a very fearful condition. You can imagine everything, you've invested your body, all the relationships, so everything, and it's all being ripped away. You don't know where you're going. You see these, horrible creatures coming to grab you. So to get fearlessness at that time, here's the formula. And it's almost just like the next verse, Tasmat. Therefore, text 7, which we'll read in a minute. Tasmat Bharata, O Bharata, one should always hear about, chant, and remember who? Sarvatma, the Super Soul, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ishvara, the Supreme Controller, Hari, Lord Krishna. He gives 4 different designations, so there's no doubt. Bhagavan Ishvara, Shrotavyak, Kirtitavyascha, Smartavya Chechitavid, for those who want fearlessness. And then he gives a verse that's very close to what we'll read in a few minutes. And that's what Etavad Sankhya Yoga Abhyam Swadharma Padinishtiya Janma Labhak Parak Pungsam Ante Narayana Smritihi. You know what that means, Alex? Ante Narayana Smriti. Yes, at the end time, Antakali, which was in the previous verse. So therefore, whatever you're going to do, in terms of Sankhya, analytical philosophy, Sankhya, yoga, your duties you perform in Varnashram, Swadharma Parinishtiya, Janmalabhak Panakpun, the real gain of the death, the fruit of that, of your birth, will be successful if you can remember Narayan at the time of death. So it's the same lesson. That's the essence of the whole thing. And then the rest of the Bhagavatam goes, and to that. And Bhagavad Gita is also focused on this. So any questions on this verse 6? Is give this general principle, which is going on every time someone leaves the body. Even the lower species, they're rudimentary, but they're going up the species gradually, and they also have minds. But the human being, we can decide what we're going to focus on. We don't just let the senses and the mind dictate. Then you're living in the lower modes of nature, and chances are you lose the human form of life, in this age especially. So this is a very important principle. Any questions from internet land? I guess not. Okay, we'll go on. Text number 7. Yes.
So I have a question that, what if someone never chanted holy name, just chant holy name at the end of the death?
They're very fortunate. They'll go back to Godhead. But it's very, very rare. It's not, that's like, because you create a certain mentality in your lifetime, and that becomes dominant. It's not even under your control. The mind is I like to say, my stupid joke, has a mind of its own. In other words, as we've read in the 6th chapter, the mind is the best friend of the living entity and the worst enemy. The controlled mind is your best friend, and the uncontrolled mind is your worst enemy. So someone who's led a life of sense gratification, the mind is not going to be under control. So it's not like, you can have that opportunity by Krishna's arrangement, but generally it's given to someone who has done some service, even this life or previous life, But really it takes pure chanting, because we can chant, and if there's offenses or it's Mishra Bhakti, we'll get another birth, in human life, but we're not going to go back to Godhead. Even a Jamil, who chanted offenselessly, the name of Narayan happened to be his son, but it was still the name, he didn't go back to Godhead right away. He was saved from being taken off to hell. Everything was cleared, but then he renounced, he went up to Bhadak Ashram or something and did some more, purification. And then he went back to Godhead. So it's not like a roulette wheel, it's all planned by Krishna. Okay, so text 7. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmada yudhyacha maya pitamano buddhir manai vaishyatya sangshayaha. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. Purport. This instruction to Arjuna is very important for all men engaged in material activities. The Lord does not say that one should give up his prescribed duties or engagements. One can continue them and at the same time think of Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna. This will free one from material contamination and engage the mind and intelligence in Krishna. By chanting Krishna's names, one will be transferred to the supreme planet Krishna Loka without a doubt. So the conclusion is, now of course Arjuna was a fighter. He was a Kshatriya. That was his profession. That was his Varna, and he was very good at it. So the idea is we can plug in, carry out your prescribed duty of blank, to try to integrate Krishna consciousness into our lives. And of course it helps if one is living with devotees. That's ideal. It's not always possible. But we're free to do so many things. What we put on our walls, for instance. You go to a devotee's house, you'll see there's a picture of Prabhupada, there's Radha Krishna, like that. What reminds you? Most important is what you hear. What you hear and what you speak. What you read and what you write, so that's why there's a whole prescriptions for sadhana, for practice. That's given by Srila Prabhupada, set up this movement. He set up like the morning program, which we can custom make for our own situation. Those who are living in a temple, of course, there are rules and regulations. But it's all based on directing our activities, linking us up with Krishna. That's what yoga is. There's so many things we can do, so many things we can hear, so many things we can read, so many things we can say. So we have to choose with our intelligence, controlling the lower self. Okay, I'm going to read this about book of Srila Prabhupada or other book about Krishna and chant, associate with devotees. Who you associate with is all important. And that association is not just personal, but of course it's through so many media. When we're associated with Srila Prabhupada when we read his books. This is the treasure of these books. Through his words, which he himself said is the most important kind of association. And through the media, so many things we can hear, which song we will hear, which book we will read, to make those decisions based on these three verses. How can I fill my mind with Krishna and purify my heart so that I want to serve Krishna more and more? And that desire will take me back to Godhead, And if we don't do that, then these other desires and things will make us come back again. We'll still be able to practice Krishna consciousness. We're promised that back in the 2nd chapter. Nothing is lost, but we're kind of prolonging the agony, so to speak. Why not, try? So therefore, the formula is here. Mama nusmara yujacha. Try to remember me at all times. Sarveshu kaleshu. With your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will come to me without doubt. And this phrase, Mama Vaishesha Sankshaya, comes up several times in the Gita. I think in the end of the next chapter, you'll find a verse, Manmana, Pavaman Bhakto, Majaji, Mam Namaskuru. Mama Vaishesi Satyam Te. Mama Vaishesi Yuktvaivam Atmanam Atparaya. That's I Vaishesi means you will attain. You will attain me. So it's a science, but it takes careful cultivation and determination and seriousness. And so, as Prabhupada here, in all three of these purports, he emphasizes the chanting of the holy name. 5, 6, and the 7. Even though it's so short, he mentions the chanting here. One can continue them and at the same time think of Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna. I remember in my own life when I was first starting Krishna consciousness, I had a job in a hospital. I was a inhalation therapist, which as time went on and I eventually joined the movement, I reflected on that. That was a good job, in the sense of giving me a real insight to the realities. Because in the hospital you see all things, birth, old age, disease, and death. Every day I saw so many people die trying to pump air, and I always pray to Krishna, forgive me. There's one guy, he had a heart attack. He wasn't an old guy, he was like in his 30s, he was young, sometimes people. And they would call us, and bring these bags. This is back in the early 70s. I'm sure it's more advanced now, but anyway, they got the bag. And there's little outlets on the wall, oxygen, or air, and if someone had a heart attack, they need pure oxygen, And I spaced out, and I plugged it into the air, and I'm pumping the guy. He's turning blue, and pumping. Oh, well, he looks like he's going, Then I finally realized it, and I put it in. He didn't die in front of me, but I may have been the cause of somebody's expiration. I don't know. Hare Krishna. Anyway, that's the material world. You never know. Some guy spaces out. I told this. I don't think you heard this before. SanDiego. I mean, here we are on Pacific Beach. It's basically peaceful. I'm sitting in my apartment on Dawes. And then I didn't even hear it when it happened, but I heard later on in the day, some poor woman, young woman, had died in her car across the street. She was parked under a tree, and one of the branches suddenly fell. It must have been a dead branch right on top of her, and crushed the top, killed her, just like out of the blue, like that. So, my God, padam yad vipadam natesham. There's a verse describing how at every step there's a danger in this lifetime. And we see, you just talk to somebody, and they've got COVID, and then before you know it, you're trying to catch your breath, and it's a shocking thing. So therefore, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. We have to be serious. So much of the Bhagavatam, you'll find long passages in the 5th canto. We were just reading in the 4th canto this allegory of King Prithu, not King Prithu, of King Prachanabarshi and Narada Muni, describing, what does Puranjan mean? It means the dweller in the city of the body. In other words, it's for all of us. It's everybody. And the guy gets very attached. He goes out and he meets some woman, and she seduces him, and he's thinking he's seducing her, and they settle down, they have a family and everything. And eventually death comes, and it's all personified. The daughter of time is old age, she's coming at you, and days and nights are the soldiers, and they're taking away your life. And of course he's dying. And now we're finally to the conclusion of it. Narada Muni is explaining everything. He's trying to get him away from the materialistic parts of the Vedas, where he's performing all these sacrifices for material advancement. Qualitatively, it's not much different from just, ordinary material life. Yeah, it's based on the Vedas, but the whole thing is you're sacrificing so many animals. If you don't do it just right, then you have to pay karma for that. You're not protected by Krishna. So, and he's describing that. Associate with the devotees and hear and chant, and become absorbed in Krishna Katha. So again and again we find these lessons in the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. Janma Mrityu Jaravyadi Dukkha Doshana Darshanam. And one of the main aspects of knowledge is to always be aware in the back of your mind. Birth, old age, disease, and death. I don't want to do anything where I have to face that again. I want mukti, But mukti, as we know from the Bhagavatam, means giving up all of these false material bodies that we've been inhabiting since time immemorial, and being situated again in our swarup, our actual form, which is just suitable for the particular service that we have eternally for Krishna. That's what mukti is. In other words, as Lord Rishabhdev says, Priti niyavan maya vasudeve namuchate dehi yogena tavat. Without love for me, Rishabhdev is Krishna. Without love for me, Priti niyamaya, who am Vasudev, Priti niyavan maya, as long as you don't have love for me, Vasudev, you will not get free from the bondage of a material body. So bhakti includes mukti. And in fact, to try to attain mukti without bhakti is impossible. It's just a fool's errand. So that's...
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Oh, Haribol. So you want to ask a question, make a comment?
Yeah, when you just mentioned, Prabhu, that Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Nudoshana Darshanam, I don't understand the last meaning of is it that we'll get Dukkha Darshan or what?
No. What that is, it's a big compound word. With the compounds you go to the end to really figure it out. So anudarshana means to be observant, to watch and see and understand. Understand the dukkha, the misery of these four things. As long as we have a body, birth, old age, disease, and death. You may have so many hopes, so much in philosophy, so many friends, so much money, whatever, but the end is coming. Mrityu sarvaharashchaham. That's more of a sutra type of it. I will take everything away as death. The atheists don't believe in God. At the time, they believe in death. And at that time, Krishna will appear to them as death. Whereas for the devotees, he'll appear as Krishna and take you back to Godhead, or he'll send his emissaries, whatever, So that's it's a little mantra we can remember. Janma Mrityu Jaravyaya, birth, death, old age, and disease. I like to say them in the order that they occur. That's birth, old age, disease, and death. And when you think about it, the one that really is the hardest to take, disease. Birth is like that, and old age is a snap, as long as there's no disease. But that's what comes with the old age. Death is also a short experience, but the disease aspect, oh my God, that can be horrific. From childhood you can be sick. So we try to avoid that, but there's no avoiding it. So that's the meaning of Janma Mrityu Jara Dukkha Doshana Darshan. To always be observant and to be aware of the miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. That's an important part of knowledge that we try to cultivate.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. So now he's going to continue and describing the benefits of practicing yoga and going back to Godhead. Text 8. Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanyagamina paramam purusham divyam yati partanu chintayan. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me. Purport. In this verse, Lord Krishna stresses the importance of remembering him. One's memory of Krishna is revived by chanting the Maha Mantra. Again, he's emphasizing that, chanting Hare Krishna. By this practice of chanting and hearing the sound vibration of the Supreme Lord, one's ear, tongue, and mind are engaged. This mystic meditation is very easy to practice, and it helps one attain the Supreme Lord. Purusham means enjoyer. Although living entities belong to the marginal energy of the Supreme Lord, they are in material contamination. They think themselves enjoyers, but they are not the Supreme Enjoyer. Here it is clearly stated that the Supreme Enjoyer is the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his different manifestations and plenary expansions as Narayan, Vasudeva, etc. The devotee can constantly think of the object of worship, the Supreme Lord, in any of his features, Narayan, Krishna, Rama, etc., by chanting Hare Krishna. This practice will purify him, and at the end of his life, due to his constant chanting, he will be transferred to the kingdom of God. Yoga practice is meditation on the supersoul within. Similarly, by chanting Hare Krishna, one fixes his mind always on the Supreme Lord. The mind is fickle, and therefore it is necessary to engage the mind by force to think of Krishna. One example often given is that of the caterpillar that thinks of becoming a butterfly and so is transformed into a butterfly in the same life. Similarly, if we constantly think of Krishna, it is certain that at the end of our lives we shall have the same bodily constitution as Krishna. So, couldn't be plainer. And this Prabhupada is again stressing the chanting of the holy name. Kalir doshanade rajan astiyeko mahadguna. Alex, you've heard this one before. You know what it means? Kalir doshanade. The Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults. Kalir doshanade rajan, O king, Parikit. The Shukadeva is near the end of his instruction. This is in the 12th canto, I believe. Kalir doshanade rajan. Astiyeko, there is, Astiyeko Mahadguna, one very good quality in this age. Kirtanareva Krishnasya Mukta Sangam Param Vajet. Simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna. Kirtanareva Krishnasya, you're chanting about Krishna, chanting his holy name. Mukta Sangha, you become free from all attachment to the thing of this world, and you become attached to Krishna. Param Vajet, and you go to the supreme abode. This is one of the founding verses, of the Sankirtan movement. So that's the special quality of this age. Now, one of the things that we learn in Krishna consciousness is Shikshashtaka. These are the 8 verses of Lord Chaitanya. And of those 8, perhaps the most famous is the 3rd verse. How to chant this holy name. Because anyone can chant, but how to chant successfully and go back to Godhead, because one can be full of offenses, mostly inattention. So one Trinada Pisunichena Tora Rapi Sahishnana Amanina Mana Dena Kirtani Exadahari. One editorial note, if you're reading Prabhupada's books, there's so many editions, printings, you may read Trinada Pisunichena Tora Eva Sahishnana instead of Tora Api Sahishnana. Now that may seem like a small difference, but there's a big difference in meaning. For one thing, Toro Ivasishnana is not grammatical. I've been through this with my Sanskrit guy who's now in India, and I correspond with him on email for questions like this. And so and Prabhupada would always say, Trinadapi Sunichena, Toro Api Sahishnana. But when I was working on the revision of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, not fully revised, but some important revision, I came across the Bengali, or the version in the book, the transcription, a transliteration, and I think it appears at least twice in the book, and it was always Eva. And I said, well, okay, if this is the way it is, the Shastra, we have to change it to that way, and so I put it that way. But later I learned that there are some mistakes even in the original Bengali that we find in the CC. That this is not the original from Krishnadas Kaviraj, but it's copied and recopied. Anyway, it's a long story, I won't give you all that. And there's a book called the Padyavali. Padyavali is Rupa Goswami's nectar file. A lot of everybody think he wrote the book, but he didn't really. He wrote some of the verses in there, but most of them are by others. And the Shikshastika is scattered throughout. This Shikshastika was not written by Lord Chaitanya as an Ashtaka. Ashtaka means 8 verses. Normally you'll find there's a lot of Ashtakas written, and then there'll be a 9th verse called the Palashuti. Pala means fruit. What you get if you meditate and you chant this nicely, it's an inducement to chant it or even memorize it. So the Shikshastika was assembled, as far as I can tell, and this may be wrong, but as far as I can tell, by Krishnadas Kaviraj, from the verses throughout the Padyavali, and presented at the very end of his Chaitanya Charitamrita. Anyway, to make a long story short, it turns out in the Padyavali that we have published, it's Uppi. They're both Uppi, which is what Prabhupada would always chant, and which he heard from his spiritual master and read. So anyway, this is all by way of saying that when you see it, if you read it and you may get confused if you're into that, it's Uppi, which means more than, it's important, more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, which is saying a lot, because the tree is really tolerant. So these are the qualities. I put it into a little poem. More humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree. To think all praise belongs to others, none belongs to me. Such qualities attract the Lord to bless one with the power to chant his name incessantly until the final hour. Now this verse describes the real way of chanting successfully. One has to chant in a kind of a helpless way, calling out to Krishna, please save me, please engage me in your service, O Radha Krishna. Prabhupada said this is the meaning of it. Now, that's an advantage of this age, because it's such a rotten age, because it's so bad for self-realization. We don't live very long. If we're interested in yoga, we're misguided, Mostly we're not interested, we're lazy, manda, madhya. And we're always disturbed. It means the mind is always disturbed. Right? So all of those are disqualifications for sexually practicing yoga. So what is it about this age where in the 11th canto, the 9 yogendras are describing it as at the age when the demigods really want to take birth in this Kali Yuga. Kaling sabhajayantyaya gunagyasar bhaganaha yatya sankirtane naiva sarvasvarto abhilabhyate. So this word svarta is very important. Swa-arta, one's own goal, the real goal of the soul. We have so many artas, bahir arta, external goals that we want. Make this money, meet this person, do this, I'll get a degree. I was reading today about this huge burden of debt. I don't know if do you have any debt from college? You're lucky. Me neither. People want to say be successful, and now college has become a big business. California used to be known for state-supported colleges, really excellent colleges, UCLA, UCSD. Even if you didn't have much money, you could get a degree and you'd get success. No, now they increase the fees. You come out of college and you owe $40,000, $50,000. Then you can't really make the payments. So the increase of the interest piles up. Before you know it, you owe $150,000, and you're just working a simple job, and it's a burden for the rest of your life. You cannot get rid of it by declaring bankruptcy. And it caused so much anxiety. Imagine like that. I wanted to get an education and become successful. Now I have this big burden on my back. So this age is the age of anxiety. So much. So therefore, if we get the right association, if we become interested in Krishna consciousness, if we're able to get inspired and get the seed of bhakti planted in our heart, then we can easily take up that role. Yeah, I'm helpless here. It's raining down, and COVID is coming. Help me, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Whereas if you're born in, if you're in the heavenly planets, they're devotees, but they're living the life of Riley. We used to say, live a long time, there's no disease, or even previous ages in this world, living in the Satya Yuga. They're pious, they're all Brahmins, but they're practicing yoga for, 30,000 years, that's their process. So, the last should be first and the first will be last. That's from the Bible, So we're the last, meaning that we're living in the Kali Yuga, The whole thing, ecocide is happening. Who knows how long? There's a million different ways that everything's coming to the end. Therefore, squeeze those beads. Chant from the bottom of your heart. Trinara Bisuni Chain. You see, that's the advantage. Being so beaten down, and being inspired by Krishna and having faith in Krishna, that's the best place to be. And call out from the bottom of your heart. So that's abhyasi yoga yuktena. So there's a practice that we have to practice it, the sadhana. And then if we can come to the point of the mind not going out anywhere, we really have to control. And that's why it's so important to become attracted to Krishna, to read Krishna book and all those things that Krishna is in is most attractive for him, And because that's what will negate all of these material attractions. That's actually, the fact. Okay, any discussion on this verse? I'm getting a little carried away, sorry. All right, now he's going to give some verses of, how we can think of him. This gets a little official now. Text 9. Kaving Puranam Manushashitaram Anoraniyang Samanusmeredyaha Sarvasya Datanamachinta Rupam Adityavanam Tamasakparasthat. One should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, as he who is the oldest, who is the controller, who is smaller than the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, and who is always a person. He is luminous like the sun, and he is transcendental beyond this material nature. Purport. The process of thinking of the Supreme is mentioned in this verse. The foremost point is that he is not impersonal or void. One cannot meditate on something impersonal or void. That is very difficult. The process of thinking of Krishna, however, is very easy and is factually stated herein. First of all, the Lord is Purusha, a person. We think of the person Rama and the person Krishna. And whether one thinks of Rama or Krishna, what he is like is described in this verse of the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord is Kavi. That is, he knows past, present, and future, and therefore knows everything. He is the oldest personality because he is the origin of everything. Everything is born out of him. He is also the supreme controller of the universe, and he is the maintainer and instructor of humanity. He is smaller than the smallest. The living entity is 1/10,000th part of the tip of a hair. But the Lord is so inconceivably small that he enters into the heart of this particle. Therefore he is called smaller than the smallest. As the Supreme, he can enter into the atom and into the heart of the smallest and control him as the Supersoul. Although so small, he is still all-pervading and is maintaining everything. By him, all these planetary systems are sustained. We often wonder how these big planets are floating in the air. It is stated here that the Supreme Lord, by his inconceivable energy, is sustaining all these big planets and systems of galaxies. The word achintya, inconceivable, is very significant in this connection. God's energy is beyond our conception, beyond our thinking jurisdiction, and is therefore called inconceivable, achintya. Who can argue this point? He pervades this material world and yet is beyond it. We cannot comprehend even this material world, which is insignificant compared to the spiritual world. So how can we comprehend what is beyond? Achintya means that which is beyond this material world, that which our argument, logic, and philosophical speculation cannot touch, that which is inconceivable. Therefore, intelligent persons, avoiding useless argument and speculation, should accept what is stated in scriptures like the Vedas, the Bhagavad Gita, and Srimad Bhagavatam, and follow the principles they set down. This will lead one to understanding. So just a few more words here before we wind up. And we can see how in the famous verses of Rupa Goswami describing the ladder from faith to love, from Shraddha to Prema, Very important for us to know and understand, because we're all on that ladder somewhere. So it begins with this word Shraddha, means faith. Now, this faith is not the pure faith that we find later on mentioned in this ladder. It's Adav Shraddha Tatak Sadhu Sangha Bhajana Kriya Tato Anarta Nibisi Tato Nishta. Nishta is firm faith, unshakable faith. But this Shraddha is the faith that brings us to, open the book that we bought maybe 5 years ago and been sitting on the shelf. let me check it out. Interest. Or come to the temple. That will bring you into the association of devotees. We should always remember, as soon as we open Prabhupada's books, we're associated with the greatest devotee in the modern age. No, I don't want to leave that. So that association is so important, because by your association, you develop desires, you develop interests. This is what association does. So sadhu sangha is so important. And then the bhajan comes. And that means chanting Hare Krishna, doing so many things, and then hopefully initiation at a certain point, and anarta nivritti, elimination of all of these unwanted things, lust, greed, anger, doubts. And then comes nishta, which is firm faith. The reason why I mention this is because so many things in our books require faith to accept, just to accept the existence of God, the existence of the soul, things we cannot perceive with our material senses. What is the basis of that faith? Well, there's two things. One is the association of the pure devotee. This is one of Prabhupada's greatest gifts when he was preaching so much and there weren't so many books, was that he could instill the faith because of his personality, because of his obvious realization, and so many things in the newcomers, people who are just coming forward, enough faith to return, enough faith to take up the process. And as soon as you chant Hare Krishna, both in kirtan, they both work together, and japa, which Lord Chaitanya did himself both, one experiences something. One doesn't know. That's why they had to stay high forever. You're dealing with the hippies into drugs and everything. And it's kind of a drug. Whoa, that was cool. That kirtan, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. An hour of kirtan, you really get it where the mind gets absorbed. So there's something there. There's a direct experience which nourishes your faith. Well, let me see, what is this all about? And then you hear the philosophy. But constantly, there are things that just challenge our credibility. Not the credibility, but our credence. But we can accept it, okay, because Prabhupada accepts it, and you go back to this whole line that I learned about of these great realized souls who are towering intellects, and they're not. What do they have to gain by running some kind of story? They themselves experience it, and they're saying, yes, this is real, even though it's beyond. So that nourishing of the faith, so that we can continue the practice and read some things and accept it, and eventually you're living really in a different world. We realize that the ordinary materialists are living in a certain world which is bound by their material conceptions, and it's not a happy world. It's full of dangers and it's full of uncertainties and anxieties, and so many things. But the devotees can live in this world of Krishna consciousness and see everything a little differently. Oh, this is Krishna's property. This is the sun that he's making the sun move. There's a person behind everything, which is the vision of the Mahabhagavats. They see Krishna's in everything. So that's what this 8th chapter is about. How we can remember Krishna, and we've just those 3 verses we read at first. They're an essential part of it, but there's many aspects in this chapter. Really. Okay, we have just enough time for a little poem. And you haven't heard this one in a while. This is from Rupa Goswami's Pajavali, from Rupa Goswami's Stavamala, sorry. Uradi kutamudadi tutabangam, navajala dadikidano sadangam, yuvati vadayatatamadana pranamati yamana tatikitadangam. His flute emanates entrancing sounds for the cowherd girls whose love abounds for the clever cloud-complexioned lord who's dancing upon the Kalindi shore. Nice meditation. If you want it, I can give it to you. It's free. I'll give you my file. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.